Okay, so what I want to do in this video is that you will see this as a supplemental video for week 1, and when week 2 you'll need to do this process. So I'm just introducing you to it for those of you that want to jump ahead for this particular first week. Just know it's going to hit you next week. But more importantly to that is what we're going to do. So far in this course, you have used console.log, okay, to output your JS to the console. Well, for myself and for students, I feel like the sooner we get you into the browser, the sooner we can teach you some of the great benefits of being in the browser, like the Chrome DevTools, debugging, walking through your code, all the kind of things you're going to need. So I figure the sooner the better. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to walk you through how to use a function without really knowing the detail. We haven't gone over it, to actually just say output whatever I would normally use console.log, output that to the browser. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to move over to a browser window, and I'm going to move also, I'm in Canvas, but I'm going to move over to my interface of my repo that's public. And so remember, anything that's PUB as an extent as the last part means it's public, and therefore everyone can see it. So in my example, I have provided 2 files, an app.js that has some code that you can see that we'll go over, and also an index.html. Okay, so what you can do if you want to do this week 1, you'll need to do it starting week 2. So it's really up to you when you want to do this part. But you'll need to, under wherever you've been directed to output to the browser, is to create these 2 files. So let me just give you the example of actually doing it. So I'm going to move over to my VS Code installation, and you can see these are here local. They have obviously, well, not obviously, been pushed to GitHub so that you can see them. Right, but for this one, I'm just going to show you to create a folder, right, as I would create, let's just call it demo. And then under demo, and again, this is your week 1, not again, but you can do this wherever you want and need to do output to the browser. I'm in this folder that I'm now currently open. I'm going to use create new file. I'm going to call it index.html. And you do want to use lowercase, no space, HTML as the extension. That extension has a particular meaning to the browser. It knows what to do with it. And the index is actually something the server, when you're actually out on a server, will look for. So we're going to create a second file, and that's going to be called app.js. Now, in the work we've seen so far, Andrew and I have created different kinds of JS file names, but app.js is by far the most common and one that it is just good to get used to. Okay, so I don't have anything in my app.js here, but in my index now, I'm moving back and forth. By the way, you can also use 2 screens and have them or 2 tabs and have it like this. I personally, for this example, are just going to use 2 tabs, and I'll move back and forth. And you can tell which one I have active by if it's highlighted, meaning it's a little grayed out. So in here, now that I've named it HTML, there's a little nice built-in editor, emit abbreviation. When I hit explanation, I hit tab, it automatically creates or inputs the code for a standard HTML page. And hopefully you've had some HTML. If not, it's fine. Well, you're going to learn some in this class. But in this case, if I wanted to look at this output, there'd be nothing on the page, but it's the structure that the browser needs in order to just create a basic page. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do a div, and notice when I type div without opening, and it is if I was doing it, the old way, the old-fashioned way, I'd do it like this. And notice how even doing that, the browser will try to help you. But if I just hit div, type div, hit tab, it will absolutely just do that opening and closing bracket. And I'm going to say ID equals, and I'm going to say output. Okay, so I'm setting up the requirements inside of the index file in order to output my JavaScript. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do script, and you'll learn about where some people, depending on what you're doing, and there's other ways now in the browser to, you can put your script up in the head tag and it's often shown there. But for our purposes, I'm going to put it down here, and you'll see one later in the course, and it says, source equals, and then it automatically, as soon as I do those quotes, says, hey, which file do you want? And I want my app.js. Okay. So in this case, they're at the same directory level. So it's totally fine to have them there like that. But as you'll see as we go through the course, you will be creating subdirectories for those JS files because you end up creating several through learning JavaScript and separating your code out. And this goes further as you go into programming with modular, creating modules and other things. But for our purposes, we're just going to leave it in the same folder for these first couple examples. All right, so that's there. And so to make sure this is all working with the JS file, I'm going to do this. I'm going to come over to here, and I'm just going to, for a minute, console.log, I'm going to say output, okay? Or let's do this, hello console, just to make it a little more fun. Now, to render this index into a browser, there's a couple ways you can do this. One way, you can right click, and I'm going to say reveal in Finder. For Windows folks, this will be, I think, File Manager, whatever that is that shows you the file. That's one way to totally do it. It's totally fine. And you could just double click and it's opening in another. It's fine. Now there's nothing here. Okay. And I'm going to close that for a second because I'm also going to show you another way that you can load an extension, and it's something called Live Server. And what you're doing here is you're running a server on your local, I already had it up there. You're running a server on your local system, and it gives us, as we extend our JavaScript knowledge, other things that we want to use from a server perspective. But you can just load, and this first one's fine. You can install it, and it'll tell you how to run it. Now, for my particular needs, because I need this all the time, I have, and in here I'll just go ahead and say open an integrated terminal, and I'll say live server. So what I have is I have on my local system installed a node package that is live server, and from whatever directory that I'm on, when I hit live server, it automatically opens up a web page. Now, what I like about this is it's also live. And what I mean by that is if you're doing it just by opening up in a file manager, you have to reload it every time you change the code. And let's just go in here, right click, inspect, go over to console, and I can see, now there's some other stuff in here, mostly because of probably my recording or something else. But just for now, I hit refresh right here, and I can see that hello console in there. So I know that my web page is working. That's great. I know that everything's connected. And by the way, source, if I come over here, my app.js, I can see that that's preview of what we're going to see later. Okay, so now I'm going to close this. I'm going to come back to my app.js. I'm going to put a little more code here. And actually, just to make this a little faster, because I recommend you doing this as well, is remember how I showed you a minute ago out on, here we go. I guess I accidentally closed GitHub. CIT93. You can actually grab this just from here. And I'm going to, just from the example, app.js, and I'm going to grab this function. I'm going to copy it. And then I'm going to come back to my editor in here. And under here, then I love it when things work like that so well. Copy, paste. Oh, much better. Okay. So this function called show on page It's something you're going to learn about how to create functions, how to run them. But here's the summary. It's just going to create a new paragraph, a P. And by the way, you could use other things like H1 to H, 6 or 7. But in that, now that I've defined that, I'm going to say the inner HTML is going to be whatever I pass into it. Again, you're going to learn functions here real soon. I'm going to say let the div output, and what this points to is in that index.html file, there was a div that I set up. Okay, and it says now point to that div, that output div, and now append it with my new content. Okay, so now what I can say is I can say show on, and you do want to keep match whatever syntax, upper lower case here. Again, this is camel case, right? And now I could say hello browser. Okay, so now nice thing is here, if I've done this right and I come over here, it automatically, I didn't have to hit refresh. If you're doing it the other way, you'll have to, and you can see that code as well. Okay, all right, so that's great. You can also just, if you're saying let message equal, let's say I say hello class. Right? I can also use that same thing, show on page, and just pass it whatever my message is. And again, it automatically refreshes. So as many times as you want to call it, because often you want to output multiple things into the console, or in this case on the page, we can use it like that. Now we will learn more and more how to add more functionality here. We're just doing some basic stuff just to give you that. Okay, the last thing I want to show you is the nice thing here is that in addition to outputting it on page, one of the things you'll see me probably have you do, maybe at the end of week 2, end of week 3 maybe, is actually when you share it in your public, is also to share it as a way that we can all just look at the web page itself. Okay, so let me show you what I mean. I'm going to come in to my example. I'm going to click on my index file. Okay, now that I'm here, I'm going to open a new tab, and I'm going to say githack.com. So githack.com, right? And so what this allows me to do is I can just come over back. Did I grab this? If not, let me do it now. I'm going to copy. I'm going to paste it into this window. And what it gives me, and I believe both work fine. I think the URL, let's see if this one works. Now here's why I want to show you this. I'm going to copy this URL. I'm going to paste it. Now, what does this do? This renders so that your code can be viewed by somebody else as a web page, because sometimes you just want to see what the output is. And oftentimes, right click inspect, you want to be able to go to console, right? Or go to sources and look at the source. Oh, in this case, I'm going to look at the app.js, right? Okay. So when you're sharing, and let me just show you this, Control C. Now in Canvas, whenever you're sharing, when I say share your link, and again, you can do this for week 1, you'll have to do it into week 2, but for your Learn Together for week 1, when I say share the link, okay, right? Yeah, link to your code. So the link to your code, now I'm not going to post this, but I'll show you. Right? You can paste that in, and actually sometimes it'll automatically do this, right? So that's the text. So if I wanted it to be click here or something else, I could. This is actually the link. And you've learned by now, I believe, because I've gone over this, that if you come down here, you actually see the HTML. Now, here's the nice thing. Once you get this set up like this, then you can use the same concept. Like if I wanted to go to my week one, because I've already modified my code to be in here in the web, in outputting to a web page, I can now, I don't have to go back to this every week. All I have to do is use, because I know the folder navigations and how to get there. And now this is the link that I will share with you for my week 1 output. Okay. I hope this helps. I know it's a couple steps here, but it's good stuff for you to know how to do and will benefit you in the coming weeks. So I hope that helped you out, and I'll talk to you soon.